We're going to have a conversation, and we want to welcome our guests, as then we welcome with very many other pieces of information. Kamuye Justin is Industrial Relations Officer at KUDHEIHA. And we said KUDHEIHA is what? Kenya Union of Domestic, Hotel, Educational Institutions, Hospital, and Allied Workers.
Right.
There's all those things.
Yes. It's a huge bureaucracy.
As in, you're looking at domestic, hotel, hospitals, schools, colleges, universities, and then you are not even satisfied. You say even allied.
Yes,
right?
I think yes. This is sweep broadly.
Completely.
Exactly.
What? Those are many. Karibu sana, Justin.
Asante.
The second thing that we want to tell you is the proverb. This gentleman called C.T. Muga, he's sitting across you. He gets proverbs from one African country every week. Then he brings us one proverb a day from that country. This week he's in Africa, East Africa, the Horn of Africa.
Yes.
Which country is this?
Kenya.
Kenya.
Yes.
Yes.
An old pot never lacks food remnants.
An old pot
Yes.
never lacks food remnants.
Yes, pot is POT here.
Na si pot ya bangi.
Hii si pot ya bangi. Hii ni pot ya sufuria.
Yes. The cooking pot.
Bas. What's your interpretation of that proverb, Justin?
My interpretation, right from the word go, is especially when you began with the issue of old, and you mentioned pot, and what came on my mind is my good times with my old mother in the village, and I remember we never lacked food. But just to give it a better interpretation is that old is gold. We cannot we cannot wish away the old people in systems, in organizations, because we need system memory. Those people are going to help us understand so many issues across the board. That's my understanding.
So
I hope I got it right. Well,
actually, the beautiful thing about interpretations is that you actually can't be wrong. Even if you said you saw a frog walking on a spoon in the moon.
It's how you see it, man. You could be schizophrenic, but that's okay.
That's fine.
thank you. I'm encouraged. This morning.
Okay. So, Justin, we've invited you so we talk about one part of your broad membership, the domestic workers.
Exactly.
Okay, you represent domestic workers, hotel workers, educational institution workers, hospital workers, and other allied workers.
Yes.
Those allied, by the way, who are they, before you move?
Okay, allied, I'll take you back. Sometimes during the World War, First World War, the Second World War, and even sometimes when you countries get at loggerheads, ideally people will want friends. People want people who look alike, people who do things that are related to you, having some aspects in common. So I'll give you an example of we represent the hospitality sector. The hospitality sector has specific aspects like the laundry issues, the cleaning aspect, and therefore if we get a cleaning firm or company that has workers who indulge themselves in cleaning, that is a very good example of an ally. But allow me to clarify, because sometimes back, the Registrar of Trade Unions encouraged unions to avoid use of the allied for the simple reason that it was encouraging encroachment. Encroachment between these unions.
You can ally yourself with everyone.
Some unions could take advantage and encroach on the membership of their sister unions. So today, like KUDHEIHA, we simply talk of Kenya Union of Domestic, Hotels, Education Institutions, and Hospital Workers.
Okay.
And then we call it a day.
Oh.
Yes.
Allied.
So the A is gone.
We were encouraged
KUDHEIHA.
to drop it.
KUDHEIHA.
KUDHEIHA.
The A is gone. It's KUDHEIHA.
Okay.
Oh, KUDHEIHA. For hospital. Okay, we get it now.
Okay.
So, the domestic workers, a bit of it. This is why you're here today. And first of all, how do they join your union?
First of all, based on the existing legislation, that is the Labor Relations Act, and of course the Supreme Law, the COK 2010, Constitution of Kenya 2010, the law allows workers to join the union. And it's a good question because that is the entry point. So there are so many ways. One, there are members who walk in, they get to our offices after learning of this union, either through social media, either through friends or referrals. So they walk in and they are given forms to sign privately because the law allows for private membership. Secondly, sometimes we do meetings, we do campaigns, we do advocacy programs, and we gather these potential members and give them an opportunity to join the union. So they pay a registration fee and they are given cards, especially if they are direct members.
Okay.
Yeah, but if it's an organization, an institution that has more than 5 workers who want to join as a single entity, then we give them the check-off system pursuant to the Labor Relations Act.
Okay.
So then they sign, they write their names and append their signatures.
Okay.
So that form is processed up to the office of the Registrar of Trade Unions. And then they are given numbers. These numbers are generated by the system of the union. And then they become members of the union.
Does one have to prove that they are a domestic worker?
Yes, it's paramount.
So how do you prove it?
One, we have to ensure that you have your card if you're a private member. Secondly, we have to be sure that you paid the initial registration fee. Yes. And 3, we have a database and a record of all our members. So those questions are raised, especially if it gets to a level where maybe we have a problem with the employer, and therefore we are called upon to prove membership. That is always the beginning point. Even if it is in court, the courts will first of all want to prove that. Mostly the defense counsel will want that to be clarified.
Okay.
If they discover there's a loophole, then they raise a preliminary objection and question the membership.
So previously, I guess from my understanding, we often thought that domestic workers are only those who work in the home setting. Like if you have a house manager or a nanny, that those are the domestic workers. So this scope is broadened now from some of the things that you're talking about. So who else does it touch on?
Apart from the domestic workers?
From those domestic workers,
yes.
Who else does it touch on apart from those who work in a home setting?
Okay, this touches specifically on those workers within the domestic setup, the households.
Okay.
It could be one. It could be a numerous number of households. So that is the initial setup.
So as long as you work in a household, whether you work as a nanny or even if it's mama fua, that also still qualifies as domestic work.
That qualifies you to be a domestic worker.
And whether you are fully employed or you work part-time or you just offer your services once a week.
You are a worker.
You're a worker.
You are a domestic worker.
And you can join the union.
You can join the union.
For many times when you have conversations with unions, we hear of now when it's a big union with many members who work in a certain institution, organization, then the union goes to the organization, the employer, and they sign a recognition agreement.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
So that opens the conversations about, collective bargaining agreement for their workers and so on and so forth.
Right.
Now, for this particular cadre of workers, it's different. Because are you going to sign recognition agreements with every employer?
No.
So how does it work then?
Okay, for domestic workers, first, the rule about recognition agreement, it goes with the numbers. If we have to give a check-off system, then it must be a household that has more than 5 workers, which is rare. Yeah. It is rare because on the extreme, you get maybe we have about 3 or 4 in a specific setup.
Yeah.
So what happens... domestic workers they are a bit disadvantaged because we are not able to get into any arrangement and sign a recognition agreement. What we always endeavor to do is to negotiate, to do social dialogue, just a direct engagement with that specific employer, and look at the specific terms of service, which is a tall order. It's not a walk in the park. It's not a walk in the park. But for the formal sectors where there's a lot of formality, the law is already there, legislation is so supportive, we simply have to press some buttons and push and then get into that arrangement.
So then if we're talking about the need to protect domestic workers,
Yes.
and there's really little to none in terms of regulation, because they're not a formalized group, how can you push for protection outside the scope of regulation?
We've had so many endeavors, right beginning from the global aspect, where we have the ILO and we have the C189, Convention 189, which has not been ratified. Kenya has not ratified. Remember, our country is a member state of the ILO. We are doing whatever it takes. We are praying that if we wake up tomorrow and there's some magic and Kenya ratifies that, as we were promised, then that will be a huge milestone.
What does it mean to have Kenya ratified?
To ratify is just to agree to the convention and have it domesticated. If you look at the constitution, it allows for domestication of international instruments or conventions. So we cannot have it activated until it is ratified. It is accepted by the specific.
What issues do we have with that particular convention?
Now, we have a number of stages that are supposed to actually happen. So about 5 stages where the process is supposed to go through the relevant ministry, our parent ministry, that is the Ministry of Labour, through the National Labour Board, is supposed to look at that instrument, call for submission of memoranda, which was already done, so that then submissions are made by specific stakeholders, including KUDHEIHA, including but not limited to KUDHEIHA, so that we inform the government of the reasons and the need to have this ratified. It has to go up to the National Assembly. The members of parliament have to look at it. There's a specific committee that considers that and advises the government.
Where are we in all these stages?
We are at the National Assembly. Memorandums were called for. Submissions were supposed to be done by latest 2 months ago. So then the parent ministry is considering those memorandums.
How long has this thing been in our system?
Well, since the days of 2011, when this convention...
2011?
Yes. Because this...
So 13 years.
2011.
Wait,
13 years.
Yes.
Yes. So there's been a lot of back and forth about it. But we are hopeful. We are hopeful.
Is the back and forth useful?
It's not useful. It's not useful. Ideally, we would just pray that the process be expeditious, so that we are able then to have a framework that will enable us consider these issues.
Have you lobbied the members of parliament to get them to understand why this thing is of paramount importance, so that they can actually speed up the process?
We have done our part. KUDHEIHA has actually, on numerous occasions, delivered petitions to parliament, petitioned the Minister of Labour.
Lobbied.
Yes.
Petitioning is not enough.
Oh, we have lobbied social partners. We've had forums where we engage with the Federation of Kenyan Employers, the Minister of Labour, and the government itself, so that we convince them on the need to have this ratified.
Clearly the lobbying hasn't worked, has it?
No.
Okay.
It hasn't.
And this disadvantages the members of your union?
Absolutely.
What's a convention? What does a convention say?
The convention seeks to introduce or actually integrate the concept of decent work agenda. Decent work agenda is seeking to, number one, ensure that fundamental rights and at work are actually observed. Secondly, it seeks to bring in the concept of social protection. Social protection is where all of us want a better life tomorrow after we hang our boots. after we are done, after our energy is spent, we need some better safety net. We want to get some service pay and go back home. We want to be sure that if I'm a domestic worker and I'm called, that my child is sick, my husband is sick, my wife is sick, am I able to access healthcare? Am I able to get a cover? Do I have subscription to the now the SHIF, currently and previously known as NHIF? Can I actually access credit facilities? So that is the second concept. 3, the idea of decent work agenda seeks to rope in the concept of social dialogue. That are we able now to sit with employers and negotiate the terms of service? Remember, my brother, it's an employment relationship. And right from the onset, when this relationship is beginning, up to the very end, there are so many things that happen in between. The moment you get employment, up to the time you separate with that employer. So there are so many issues that need to be addressed. And also, looking at the issue of enterprise development, that seeks to ensure that we have job opportunities for these people. So that convention has those issues and want to make it formal.
Okay.
Yes, and to do away with the informality.
So in the absence of that, are you saying all these things are not happening?
Well, we have some good employers who will try their best. We have employers who will walk in and even consult us. We have had employers who call us, and we want to congratulate them. They call us and ask us about NSSF, about NHIF, about the basic pay and how they need to comply. So we have seen some of them who are God-sent, model employers, comply with that. But majority, doing the opposite.
Okay, let's
Yes.
take a break. We'll continue the conversation shortly. At 7:30, our guest this morning is Justin Kamuye. He's an industrial relations officer at KUDHEIHA. It's a union of domestic hotel, educational institutions, and hospital workers, representing all of them countrywide. We are talking about the improving the welfare of domestic workers, and that's our focus this morning. What we need to know about that, and how then they can also get their rights protected and justified. Justin, if somebody is a member of KUDHEIHA,
Yes.
and then they come into my employ, what's the benefit? Individually, they are a member of KUDHEIHA,
Yes.
and I've employed them.
Okay.
How do they enjoy the benefits of being a member of KUDHEIHA?
Number one, we are a union mandated to do the following. 1, to organize our members. Organizing is creating order where there is disorder. How do you organize them? We actually mobilize them, we mop them, we consolidate them, and secondly, we do capacity building. We educate our members. We are a responsible union that ensures that our members understand the basics. They understand the laws. We simplify the concept to help them better members. And allow me to point out this. In the process of doing capacity building, we all also, at one point played the role of the devil's advocate. We do issues like discipline at work, encourage our members to be responsible employees, to be disciplined, to work well, to respect the employers. I know this is shocking because ideally the perception is that we incite our members.
Yes.
We tell them to go and bang tables. We tell them to go and abuse their employers. That's not the case. So we would like employers to understand that we also do something so that as they get back, we encourage them. If you know you are going to quit your job, you want to separate, do it honorably. Notify your employer. So that is the second thing. 3, your employer, you as an employer will also benefit on the concept of social dialogue, especially if we are able to help you understand. If we sit down to negotiate these terms of service, 1, it is noble. 2, it is godly. 3, it will actually enhance retention. Why? Because this employee will enjoy enhanced terms, and therefore you'll be able to be with this employee for longer periods. And the concept of productivity.
Okay.
I'm asking
Yes.
what the benefit would be, because I'm comparing this domestic worker to someone who's a group who are in some formal employment.
Yes.
Okay. So, for example, those who work in a hospital or a hotel or an educational institution, there are many. There's one worker, you've signed a recognition agreement. You can collectively bargain for their pay and their terms of service.
Yes.
So they can say that because we are many, our union rep is able to come and have a negotiation with our employer.
Exactly.
Because we are many, our union rep can even crack the whip and say, you know what, we are downing our tools on such and such a day because you're not honoring the terms of service that we had agreed on. Because we are many, there's safety in numbers with them. But the ones who work individually in homesteads, what's the benefit of one being a member of your union? You're not going to collectively tell them to picket ati wale wote mnafanya kazi South B kuanzia Tuesday.
Okay. Let me answer that question. It's a brilliant question. If you look at the Constitution of Kenya, 2010, it clearly allows and gives all workers right to fair labor practices. So we are not having a vacuum. Why? Because we have the basic legislation. I call it the Big Five. We have the Employment Act. We have the Occupational Safety and Health Act. We have the Work Injury Benefits Act. But thank God, because there's something that is being done to call it Work Injury Compensation Act, because you cannot say you are benefiting after you have been injured. So having this basic legislation, we are able to represent this worker, this domestic worker, in case of any eventuality. I'll give you an example of those who have actually been unfairly dismissed by their employers. On the basis of their membership, we are able to shoulder the issues of litigation. I'm sure you understand it's not a walk in the park. It consumes lots of amounts of money and time and resources. So if one is a member, such issues are considered. Secondly, those who have joined us, I want to assure you, there's been a progressive growth of their terms of service. Unfortunately, where employers learn of their union membership, some of them become so rogue.
Terminate.
So rogue. In fact, they're like, so umenipeleka union, I'll teach you a lesson. But I want to tell you without blinking that there's light at the end of the tunnel. Because gradually we have seen employers now get this concept. Yes. So those are some of the benefits. Consider that domestic worker who's not a member of the union. One, the worker is naive. Two, if something happens, like he's unfairly dismissed, think about litigation. Is he able to even go before the court? Right, the law allows representation in person. But how? How will he go about that? Some of them get stranded. But if they become members of the union, we are able to guide them, advise them as appropriate.
There was a minimum wage, allowable wage, that was prescribed and clearly stated by, who said it? I'm trying to remember. Anyway,
I think many
how
people
do
have said
you
it here.
ensure? How does a union ensure that the minimum wage that has been determined for the domestic worker is actually applied and is actually adhered to?
One, we are able to bring employers on board. Sometimes we invite them in our offices. But this specifically happens in the urban setups, like here in Nairobi. If you go to Kisumu City, if you go to Mombasa, you go to Eldoret, you go to Nakuru, there are chances of you having a one-on-one with some of those employers and advise them. Secondly, where we are sure that the employer will not have to pick issues, we write to them, we advise them. Three, we have an indirect approach where we sensitize our members separately and advise them based on the good relationship, to go first of all, create a conducive atmosphere and enlighten the employers. But all that is with huge difficulties, a number of difficulties. You can be sure.
What's the success rate?
Our success rate is that as we speak, we have at least 13,000 domestic workers who are registered. They have been sensitized. They have been equipped.
Let me ask you something. This is something we've discussed here. When you hear of the union of, say, teachers, the people who belong, whichever it is,
KUPHET or
KUPHET or the National or Kenya NAT, whatever it is.
Yes.
These teachers have formally undergone certain training, and they are members by virtue of that training and by virtue of the work they do, isn't it?
Yes.
The training component when it comes to domestic workers, or the understanding of domestic work and the requirements of domestic work, because when you set a minimum or a maximum wage, a lot of it is pegged onto this element of training.
Exactly.
So now, with your members, how then do you ascertain? Because we know that our lived reality when it comes to domestic work, in many instances, that domestic work is a relative. In many instances, they are below the adult age requirement for such employment.
Yes.
So, given the many details, some of them really unpleasant about this particular job bracket, how does your union ensure, one, that your members can actually get a fair shake by, one, having a certain fundamental training, so that when a member of your union is employed, it is the employer can take it for granted that this particular person will have knowledge of this and this and this and this and this. Something as simple as using an iron. Okay? That's number one.
Right.
Number two, how then do you ensure, because many of these other unions, like the ones I've mentioned, have a CBA. Okay? So how then do you get a CBA with the employer of this domestic work? I think you see where I'm going with my discussion.
Yes, I'm getting the question.
Because the reason why I'm belaboring this point is that this cadre of employee plays actually a very, very important role in our homes.
They do.
Extremely important.
They do. And I'm happy that you are able to recognize that.
Yes, and yet they are shortchanged at every possible turn.
So I want to first of all say that KUDHEIHA has friends, social partners. I'll give an example of a partner called Solidarity Center. This is a partner that sometimes back was able to team up with a union, and through the NITA, that is National Industrial Training Authority, came up with a basic curriculum, a basic manual, training manual for these domestic workers. If you look at the manual, that manual has what it takes, the basic issues in regards to the job descriptions. Talk of cleaning, talk of laundry, talk of cooking. So something has been done by the union. Secondly, the union has always encouraged employment agencies, because employment agencies is one of the pools or sources where employers go. They walk into employment bureaus and get these domestic workers. They walk into employment bureaus and request for, I want a houseboy, I want a house girl of this age, can I get one? So the union has also encouraged the employment agencies to do those preliminaries, to train them, so that after we recruit them to be our members, already we are recruiting them after the employment. So we are able to deal with that and look at the curriculum. The union is also looking forward to enhance the curriculum and train these, do training of these workers so that they are a bit professional. I remember one employer who was also challenging us, and she was bold enough and wanted to know whether this employee was qualified. But allow me to also remind employers that demand for labor is derived demand. When we demand labor, we are demanding labor for what it can do. Okay. So the big question here is she able to do laundry? Is she able to do cooking? Is this gentleman able to do the gardening? If they are able to do that, then it qualifies that they be paid. Yes.
You hired them because you ascertained that they could do the job that you needed them
Exactly, and want to appreciate the government because the other day you see the government pushing for, through the Kenya National Qualifications Authority, just to qualify some aspects, so that if we discover, James didn't go to formal education, but is able to do laundry properly.
Yeah.
Can we get some certificate for him?
Recognition of
So
prior
that would
learning.
be a bright day for us.
Okay.
Yes.
So then within those circles where we talk about labor derived, that if you say, can this person do this, then by virtue of that being in the affirmative, then they should be paid for that.
Exactly.
But beyond that, there are also certain protections that are being sought after for this person in that space.
Yes.
What are some of those?
One, we have the issue of, when we talk of protection, we are looking at a huge concept. It's like safety. We look at safety. Safety at work is a huge component. If we want to talk about occupational safety, we want health, occupational hygiene. A work environment that is free of physical, psychological, spiritual abuses, some practices that are uncouth that could hinder performance of this worker. For example, if we talk of physical aspects, there are these homesteads which are gated to begin with. They are isolated. And you see, if you rope in the issue of isolation, you bring in the issue of risk, you bring in the issue of accountability. Because these domestic workers are in homesteads that are isolated, the risks are high.
Okay.
Why? Because the employer is like, after all, there's no watchdog. Who is seeing me do this? If it's a public entity, then it's an open door policy. We walk in here, we are able to see. The ministry can come in and do inspections. But is it private homes? So there are so many things behind the curtain. So we want an environment that is free of all these issues, so that it considers the safety of this worker. The space, the workspace is safe. Yes.
Many of these domestic, I'm stuck on this domestic because many of them are not employed to cook or to sweep the house. They are employed to look after children, toddlers.
Children ayers.
Yes, these are domestic workers. Now, in addition to this, they're given all these other duties. Now, the fact that that domestic worker may or may not have had a child, but let's talk about a domestic worker who has their own child. And so you take it for granted that they will know how to look after a child, or when they're given a set of instructions by the employer that they will be able to understand. Now, the terms of employment that you said, as a union, you help educate your members. Now, this cadre of employee, how exactly would you educate them on their rights? How exactly? You said you have partners.
Yes.
Part of the curriculum that the partners have, do they employ these people on these rights? And then when you talk about partners and domestic work, you're talking about domestic workers who are probably found within towns. Now, the vast majority of our population is in the rural areas. And in the rural areas, you also have domestic workers.
We do.
Okay, now, who trains these people in their rights to understand that this is what is actually due to them? This is what is expected of them or this is what they should expect from the employer?
Oh, that is a good question. KUDHEIHA has a serious branch network. We have a presence in all the counties. We have county offices manned by branch secretaries. I'll give you an example of Busia. I also double up as the branch secretary of this union in Busia. And you see, being a border county, there are so many other issues that come in, especially trafficking persons, child labor, and all that. So what happens? This union devolves these functions up to the county level. So the branch secretaries are able to organize these domestic workers, bring them together, and do the capacity building. That is how we approach it. So that we are able to get to...
So how do you get them? So somebody is employed and lives and works in this homestead.
Yes.
They get their off day on Sunday. When do you do your training?
Your question is as good as my answer, because most of the trainings we do, we conduct them on Sundays, unfortunately.
Why is that unfortunate?
It's unfortunate because we look forward to a day where we'll be able to have them get their rest days on Fridays, on Saturdays, on Wednesdays, so that we can be able to do the same things on those specific days.
When you take into consideration what is happening, because it's a unique space, is it not?
It is.
That we've come in to fill in a gap that has been left because the owners of the home, for example, the ones who are employing them, also have to be away doing something else. So then the assumption is that the only time they can give them time off is when they themselves have the time off, isn't it? So how do you work around that when the reason why you're there is because I can't be? But then now, when I can be is when I can give you time off.
Okay.
Because, I mean, you can imagine if you work wherever you work, and then you say, okay, well, I'm going to take Wednesday off each week so that my house manager can have Wednesday off. Do you see what I mean?
I see. I get
How
your
does
point.
that? How would that even work in terms of pursuing protection? Because that's what we're talking about now.
Yes. Now, we have had difficulties. If you look at what the law provides for, the law simply talks of one rest day in a period of 7 days. That is a week. The law has never said that it must be a Sunday, must be a Saturday, must be a Thursday. We even have domestic workers who are Seventh-day Adventists.
Yep.
Right? And you get employers say, fine, if that is your day of worship, then that will
That
as
will
well
be
be
your day
your day,
off.
your rest day. There's a conflict. So the only challenge we get as a union is how do we help this employer? Because it takes two to tango, right? Sometimes we have a skewed approach. The other day we were being reminded that we are with these members and we are building their capacity, but what about the employers? Right? There's the Federation of Kenyan Employers, which ideally is supposed to do that. But again, they may not have the mechanisms to get to such levels. So then it rolls back to us to up our game and ensure that we implement that. We get to rope in these employers. But remember, I'll repeat and tell you that it's not an easy journey. It has a lot of difficulties, but we are determined to overcome those difficulties. Yeah, I'll just give you a case study. Some 5 years ago, most of the employers actually in charge of our domestic workers were a bit rogue. But today, there are those who will honor our invitations. They appear. There are those who we get feedback from these members who will even want to understand from these workers in regards to the minimum wage, in regards to the rights, and they are able to comply.
Do you think?
So there's growth.
Okay.
There's growth.
So with culture and tradition, because we can't run away from that, right? We're talking about, global bodies, ILO is asking for 1, 2, 3 in terms of regulation to be put in. Can we ignore really what culture and tradition is now when it comes to how we operate within that space? That you're even talking sometimes where a domestic worker is a member of a family.
It's a relative.
It's a relative, and then now here we are applying these formal regulations to. Is it really possible to say that, okay, well, let me make sure that I stay within the ambit of 1, 2, 3 and that I'm following these tenets, etc., etc. How do we then come to a place where the two then can work side by side?
Okay, I want to clarify that if you look at the legislation we have in regards to employment, it has an exemption. It has a soft touch on employment agencies where maybe there's members of the same family. I'll give you an example. If you get your nephew to live in with you and do the domestic work, and maybe she has grievances and she's our member, if at any point you prove that she's your relative, then sometimes our hands are tied, which is why you'll see some smart employers just come up with enterprises and ensure that the composition is 90% family members. They know. Some of them have looked at the law, and so they understand. They give us a technical knockout. But what we are saying, where there's no relationship, we advocate that some of these issues be considered. We advocate that if we invite these employers, if we request our members to come for meetings, can they be allowed? So that we do our role. We do our role.
Justin, you said you're the Secretary General of...
No, I represent the Secretary General, but I'm the branch secretary of this union in Busia County.
Now, we had a conversation just 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
And it was brought to our attention that Busia is one of those that's ranked highest among trafficking issues.
Exactly.
And most of these people are working as domestic workers. Now, what do you do about that?
Now, I'll give you a case study. About 4 months ago, we have been running a series of programs, of course, through some social partners like Teredes Homes, where we are able to bring them together and talk to them. Unfortunately, there are challenges like in Busia, where you get some of them are from the neighboring country, Uganda. There's a specific group of naive domestic workers called Karamajong, where you get girls who have dropped out of school, they are underage, and sometimes they sneak in this country through the porous borders. They get employment. One, there's language barrier. They do not understand the language. Two, any effort to have them on board to be assisted, it hits a dead end, because some of them imagine, is this government of Kenya trying to investigate us?
So what do you do?
We sensitize the employers. We also lobby with the local authorities, especially the provincial administration, the former provincial administration, county commissioners, and some county commissioners to up their game. The police department and the customs through immigration to be alert.
Justin, we thank you very much for joining us today and for creating awareness on the plight of domestic workers in this country and what you as a union do. Justin Kamuye is Industrial Relations Officer at the Union of Domestic Hotel Education Institutions, Hospitals, Workers. He's been our guest this morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.